The reality is that perfectionism has probably made you as an adult at times really extraordinarily successful. And there are times that it can be exhausting. So it's about figuring out the language you use was like, is it toxic or is it productive?
You're listening to Parenting with Impact, a podcast for parents like you, raising complex kids to become capable, independent adults, even in this complicated world. Each episode brings expert insights and real-life strategies to help you parent with confidence, calm, and clarity. Here are your hosts, Elaine and Diane.
Welcome back, everybody, to another conversation in the Parenting with Impact podcast. Diane and Elaine here today, and we are talking about progress and not perfection.
Well, I think like the big thing is perfectionism, right? And it's a big topic. We were like discussing. This may be another situation where we end up with more than one episode, Elaine, just to say that out loud. But
yeah,
perfectionism like takes so many different flavors. It may be us with the perfectionist tendencies. It may be our kids with the perfectionist tendencies. We're going to try to dance around. When does it work? When does it not healthy? What to do instead? How do we want to dive into the conversation, Elaine?
I always want to set the stage and get the context of what we're talking about before we try to solve the problem, right? Make sure we know what we're talking about. And so the solution that we offer people often is progress, not perfection. But so I think to do that, let's talk about what is perfection and what are the gifts and the challenges of perfection and perfectionism.
Yeah.
Can you start?
So, yeah, no, that's fair. And I think that when I think about perfectionism, I'm interested in your take about this. There's kind of almost like three flavors of it. One is many of us are high achievers, right? It's just sort of constantly, we've been conditioned to do better, be better. It's like continuous improvement was a big thing, like back when I was early in the corporate days. And so there is this kind of out there healthy idea that you can always do better. You can always make things better. And it's an aspirational sort of thing. And then the other time perfectionism tends to show up is almost this sort of, oh my gosh, I've got to get it just right. And a lot of times it's like, I would say it's like fear or anxiety, gremlin driven, Elaine, is the language I would use, right? And so I kind of think about those flavors of perfectionism, one that feels inspirational and one that feels kind of exhausting.
But you started off saying
three. What was the
What was your third? Because as I heard you, I was like, okay, there's that continuous improvement, high achieving, leave the world a better place. Right?
Yeah.
And then there's the thing that I was thinking as I heard you say it was there's also the never good enough.
Yeah, that's where I was going to go, right? It's just sort of, it's still a gremlin, but it's like this sort of, I've got to get it right or I'll never get it. I mean, a lot of times there's like all this core stuff that's going on underneath it. It's like, I'm afraid of failure, or I have to get it, which is kind of, I have to get it right. Or I want somebody to like me, so I have to get it right. Or I'm afraid to make a mistake. And so, I mean, that's where a lot of times our kids get stuck because they're so into perfectionism, they can't even initiate because they're afraid if I don't do it perfect, I shouldn't do it at all, kind of thing.
Well, that was my story. And the other piece to that was like there was an expectation that everything was going to be not just done, but done well, right? It wasn't good. It wasn't okay to be good enough. It had to be, the expectation was excellent. So it wasn't just wanting to be a high achiever, but it was also this pressure of high achiever.
Well, and I think that I think transparently. So, I mean, I think people who know me know that I've been a high achiever most of my life. I was a straight A student in school, blah, blah, blah. And if my mom were still here, she would say, we didn't put that on you. That was all you. And I don't want to fight about whether or not that's true. But there was this story that I told myself when I was a kid, and I've done a lot of work on this, guys, right? So the story I told myself when I was a kid that if I only did X, then I would make sure that I was safe. I would like fit in the family. I didn't have any risk of anybody being mad at me or irritated or rejecting or like, it was like this sort of protective bubble that I kind of created that it's like, okay, like stand up straight, do all the things and you'll be safe, which is a normal thing for a kid to do, but it's still really exhausting. Exhausting.
And so it's interesting because I think you and I, so we were both high achievers, excellent students, go to great school, all of that good stuff. And it came with a cost, right? So for you, your mom says it was self-motivated. My parents would probably say the same thing. Although I have had this conversation with my mom about it because, my dad was the dad who would playfully say, you come home with a 98 and he'd say, well, what happened to the other 2 points?
Yeah.
And it was playful, but there was also this expectation there. Like there was a message there, like you're supposed to be. And so I think I did get the message that I was supposed to do everything well. And I actually just had this conversation with my 88-year-old mother this week,
Oh,
actually.
wow.
Because I got the message somehow, if you don't do anything, you don't do well. And that meant I didn't do a lot of things if I didn't do it well immediately. And so I didn't do things that I wanted to do because I didn't do it well quickly enough.
Isn't that what call fixed mindset versus growth mindset? Just to put in a plug for that, that's kind of the same sort of thing. Yeah,
it's a great way of looking at it. And my mom told me basically, she didn't hear it as a challenge or a problem. She's like, well, yeah, same for me. But she didn't have a problem with it. She just didn't do anything. She didn't do well. Whereas for me, I didn't like what I majored in. I didn't like. It led me down these paths I didn't even want to be on because I could let myself to do something where I was going to be successful at it.
Well, and what you're describing is that part of this is been generational thing. I mean, it's it has to do with the way people used to parent or the way people are still parenting. And honestly, it's sometimes it is us raising the bar. It's I want my kid to live up to their potential. That's one of the quintessential parenting things, right? And a kid might hear that living up to potential. It's oh my gosh, I have to get it perfect, right? I have to so they hear our language and they interpret it in a certain way.
Great observation.
And so I think that we talk about this all the time when we're teaching about communication is there's two parts of it there. One is what we say and the other is what they hear. And so being really clear, is it about trying hard? And if I see you observing, if I can observe that you're trying hard, and I got to tell you, our kids are trying really hard. Even if it doesn't look like they're trying hard, they're really trying hard. But I think that's the piece of it. And well, I'm dancing into the medicine a little bit here in the solution, but yeah, let's back up.
Hold on solution, because so I think we've talked a little bit about what our experience was like. And I'm thinking about my kids, particularly one of my kids who I'll never forget when they said to me, don't you see, Mom, if I don't do it, I haven't done it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that avoidance that comes that we think it's because they don't care, but it's not because they don't care. It's actually a different flavor of perfectionism. It's the kids who will work on something and then rip it up, or the kids who will do all this work and then not turn it in. Not because they haven't remembered to turn it in.
Because they purposely are I can't turn this in. I'm
right. Or I can't, or I have one of my kids who could never choose a topic because she wanted to get the right topic. And so there's this avoidance behaviors that we see that we get frustrated with as parents that we may not realize what's underneath it is their issue or sense of perfectionism or fear of failure or fear of success or misinterpreting our expectations or interpreting our expectations, right? However it's showing up. So it's not just being tight and making sure everything's done right. Sometimes avoidance can actually be about perfectionism.
Well, and as you're saying that, one of the things that I may be dancing into the solutions to roll me back, but what you're describing is a challenge of indecision, right? And so, right, it's this sort of, I don't know what to choose because there's part of me that thinks that I might get it wrong. And there's part of me that doesn't know whether it would be, it's this, there's all this stuff. And I've always have labeled myself as an indecisive human. And what I realize is that I do make decisions well, but I have to go through a process for figuring out what's the worst thing that would happen? What's the best thing that would happen? How do I decide? Could I really get this wrong? I mean, all this sort of things. But I had to figure that out. I got to tell you, in the last 5 or 10 years, I figured out how to help myself make decisions. I didn't know that when I was a kid.
Well, and just making decisions can be exhausting. I mean, a lot of our kids are dealing with decision fatigue because they're making decisions we don't even realize they're making. right? You got a kid in a classroom struggling with attention. I don't care what age. They're having to decide, what am I paying attention to right now? And then how do I bring myself back and now pay attention to that? And when do I stop paying attention and start paying attention? All of these transition points and executive function challenges that our kids are dealing with are requiring them to put more effort into processing information and making decisions than their neurotypical peers. And so we don't even realize all of the different ways in which they're trying to figure out what's expected of them all day long. And that can be exhausting.
It can be exhausting. And I just want to put a plug in, because the language you used made it sound like we don't all do that. And the reality is we all do that. But if you're a neurotypical, your ability to go, I'm not paying attention to that, this is what I need to pay attention to, is completely different than somebody who's neurospicy, right? It's just sort of, if you think about the fact that, like, if we're sitting on the porch, we're having a great evening, we're listening to the music, and all of a sudden the neighbor's dog 7 houses down starts barking, and my partner's irritated, and it's like, well, just don't listen to it. It's like, he can't not listen. Like, it's just like, he can't tune it out. It's just not that easy. And so just a reminder that the decision fatigue is different for neurospicy humans. The filtering is different for neurospicy humans.
Right. Because we're dealing with, often, a lot of us, whether it's ADHD, anxiety, autism, we're getting flooded by a lot of information. We're receiving more information. And so we have to process more to get to the nugget, to the decision, to the action, to the focus. We got to wade through. It's like wading through the muck to get to the clarity.
So that was a little segue about decision fatigue and how it ties into perfectionism, which is what we're really kind of focusing on talking about, because people get stuck. They get stuck in a fixed mindset. They get stuck in, I got to do it right. They get stuck in, what do I even do? I mean, all of these things are kind of flavors of perfectionism. And the symptom that we see is stuck or distracted or avoided, or what. There's so many different ways it shows up.
Hyper-controlling, lots of ways it shows up. So let's take a quick break, and then now we can come back and talk about solutions. Hi, it's Elaine. And if you like this podcast, you'll love our coach approach. Whether you're a parent looking for support or a professional supporting families, we invite you to download a free guide with 12 key coaching tools at impactparents.com/gift. You can begin using a coach approach to help kids become more independent or improve all of your conversations at work and at home. That's impactparents.com/gift. All right, welcome back, everybody. We are having a juicy conversation about perfectionism. We haven't even talked about progress, about perfectionism and all of the different ways that it can show up. It doesn't always look like what we think it might look like.
Yeah.
So move us forward now.
So I think that there's so many different ways into this, but part of it is, as always, recognizing what's really going on, right? Is it a fear-based sort of thing? And what are they afraid of? I'm afraid of making a mistake. I'm afraid of getting it wrong. I'm afraid that it's going to be hard. It's like this sort of, you've got to really kind of, it's almost like this creative conversation about, well, what is it you look like you're stuck. What's up? You look like you're having a hard time getting started.
So, and what jumped at me as you said that was, our curiosity has got to come from a place that's matter of fact and not judgmental.
Yes.
It may take our kids a bit to trust that we're there, because if they're used to us coming in and saying, you're stuck, you should do this.
What's wrong? Get going. Yeah.
Right? And when we come in and get curious, they may be a little hesitant at first. So that's just a note to be aware of. There's kind of our expectations, and then we've been talking kind of about us and about them. But when we think about progress versus perfection, which is something we like to say, that's about what we as parents hold for our kids as much as anything. It's like helping us see how to be with their progress and setting expectations in a way that's healthy for them. What were you going to say?
And this ties into so many things, because the reality is, and this is the reminder, our kids are often 30%, 3 to 5 years behind their peers in some areas of executive function development, right? And so we're like, okay, so perfection sometimes looks like, I want you to behave like a regular ninth grader or a regular college student or right. So it's technically not perfection, but it's this sort of, I want you to be somewhere other than where you are in terms of your capability. And that comes off as pressure to do more than you're capable of, right? And so that ties into and probably feels like mom's never satisfied. She wants me to do it perfect. Dad's got the bar so high, I can't deal with it. Whoever the one is holding the bar, and I'll acknowledge at this point that a lot of times it's the world that holds the bar or the
Yeah.
teacher or the coach or whoever it is. But there's this sort of, I should be here. And the invitation is to go, okay, so where are they? And
Mhm.
how much
Developmentally.
where are they right now? How much further are they than they were 6 months ago?
Mm.
What can they do now that they didn't used to be able to do? What's the next thing that they want to challenge themselves to do more of? It's like this that we talk about independence being a process, not an endpoint. Like
Mhm.
you're moving them down the line instead of being like, okay, we got to get there and be done.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. We were just talking about this in a coaching group for parents of teens about, because there was one woman there who just celebrated her 1 year in the group. And she's like, I'm getting it. I'm not going anywhere. And so there's a whole range of people in the group. And this is exactly what we were talking about is remembering to stop and give ourselves credit for the progress we've made, for what is going better or well, instead of that tendency to focus on what's not.
Well, yeah, and I'm going to take that a step further. Like I was doing this in a small group last month, and we were talking about the exercise we were doing was something like, I can be a good parent if, like, it's a sort of, I can't, I'm not a good parent if, right? It's just sort of all of the rules that we have
Mm.
about, it's like, if my kid is failing band, I'm not a good parent. If my kid is blah, 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 I'm not a good parent. And it's like this sort of black and white, un, impossible to achieve
Right.
often, right? It's this sort of, we're holding the standards so high and we're attaching our value as parents. This is the other layer of perfectionism. I'm attaching my value as a human being to my kid's success. And that not only is that exhausting, but it's a setup, right?
Yeah. Total setup. Well, and I'm thinking about it from the kid's lens, which is if I need my kid to perform so that I'm a good parent, then I'm going to hold impossible standards sometimes, and or I'm going to go back in and correct every little thing. And then you get a kid who's like, "Well, why should I even try? Because it doesn't matter what I do. It's never going to be good enough. It's never going to be right. I'm not even going to bother." And then they stop trying. And
Well,
then we
and
get mad that they're unmotivated when the fact is that they're unmotivated because frankly, it was never going to be good enough.
and oh, by the way, that doesn't just happen with kids, it also happens with co-parents
Yeah.
all the time. You're never satisfied.
Fair
I'm
enough.
going to just stop trying.
Yeah. Well, and my husband and I have had this conversation very transparently because he's the cook in the family, and when it comes to certain things, I won't even try to like get him a plate for lunch because I'm definitely not going to do it right. And so I've stopped trying, and that's not fair. And so we have this conversation, and there's a reason, right? I've been trained to not try.
Mhm. Well,
So
and you have to be aware of that, and you have to be able to communicate that and go, "This is why I'm stuck. Can you help me? I don't want to be stuck."
yeah.
And he needs to be able to go, "Oh yeah, maybe I need to figure out how to invite support." It's like we talk about asking for help. That's the thing that just popped in as you were saying that, Elaine. It's like we talk all the time about the fact that our kids don't ask for help. And a lot of times, one of the key reasons our kids don't ask for help is that we haven't modeled it for them because we like it a certain way. We like it our way. We're going to do it our way. It's easier to do it ourselves than it is to have it done wrong. I mean, all of these things are food for perfectionism, whether it's ours, again, our perfectionism or kids.
So if we move into solution land, right?
Yeah.
So the framework we often talk about is progress, not perfection. Look for improvement instead of, and like focus on the process instead of the outcome. Diane mentioned that a little while ago. Um, when you've got younger kids, or actually really all age, one way to practice progress, not perfection, is to not go back in behind people and correct it, right? Don't check their homework. Let the teacher be the one to check their homework. Don't refold the laundry. Don't reload the dishwasher. Like, oh, Diane's covering her face, right? Because we see, and I've been noticing this now that my kids are adults. We're all thinking independent people, right? So we all think, well, you should get in the left lane there. Or, you should really go that direction to get there. I see this in the car with my kids, now adult kids, all the time, because they're not really trying to boss me around. It's just they're verbalizing their view of the world, and I'm
what they would do.
verbalizing my view of the world. And
Yeah.
guess what? It's not the same.
Well, and it's really funny because you're talking about the dishwasher. Like, I think we've had several conversations about dishwashers on the podcast, but I need to ask my partner, because I suspect the story I tell myself is that he doesn't even notice when I reorganize the dishwasher. But if he does notice, like, I want to make sure that he knows that it's just because I do it differently and not because I think he's doing it wrong, right? And there's a difference there. It's like the sort of,
except for the dishwasher might be the one exception when there's a right way and there's a wrong way. And
there is a right way to do the dishwasher. I am sorry. Like, there is, like, when you pack a dishwasher like a raccoon on meth, that's just not the right way to do it. It's not.
But that's a whole other conversation. All right.
Yes.
So what else do we want to leave with as we wrap this conversation?
Well, the other thing I want to say, so yes, focus on the progress, the process, take the baby steps, identify the interim steps, but it goes back to this sort of even just awareness of what it is, where it might come from, acknowledgement. Like, I have all these rules in my head that have been there since I was 5 years old and I was trying to be a good girl, or wherever your stuff comes from. Do I really want this to be the way I'm living my life? Where is it helping me? This is the question I love. Where is it helping me? And where is it getting in my way? Because the reality is that perfectionism has probably made you as an adult at times really extraordinarily successful. And there are times that it can be exhausting. And so it's about figuring out, like, I think the language you used was like, is it toxic or is it
productive?
Or is it productive, right? And so just even that awareness, and if you want to go in and dig in and figure out where it came from, go back and do some work on your childhood. That's fine. That's great. We like to do that.
We love the deep.
But just being aware of it can make all the difference in the world.
So yeah, totally that. And here's the other thing that we haven't talked about it, when I want to bring it up, because I think there's so many coexisting conditions in our community, right? And a lot of our kids have ADHD or autism and also anxiety, or maybe they have an OCD flavor of anxiety. And this goes back to, is it toxic or is it productive? I had a therapist who said to me once, I have a sibling with both ADHD and OCD. And he said to me, the OCD saved that person's life. Because the ADHD had them all over the place and the OCD helped them narrow in and focus. And so, is it diagnosably OCD? Yes. Was it interfering to such an extent? Actually, it was helping them manage something else. Mm-hmm. Right? So I often say every tool has the potential to be a weapon, and every rule over applied can become a liability, right? Yeah. And so, yes to progress, not perfection. And sometimes a little bit of, excellence, perfectionism, if it's not damaging, can actually help to manage other things. So we don't want to throw anything out. We just want to understand it
and be conscious.
To be with it and be conscious of it, right?
Yeah.
Anything else?
Great conversation. No, this is fun.
It was a good conversation. All right. Take care, everybody. Next episode, stay tuned, tune in. Next episode is going to be a conversation with Kelly Dorfman, who is a nutritional guru who saved my family's life. So excited to talk to her.
Well, and before we go, let's everybody do their insights, right? So take a minute before you go on to the next episode and reflect on what we were talking about, perfectionism, and maybe one gem, one aha, whether it's about your kids' perfectionism or your own or your parents, wherever you want to go with,
right, that you want to take forward with you into the week. And as always, friends, thank you for what you're doing for yourself and for your kids. You make a difference, truly. See you on the next episode.
Thanks, everybody.
You've been listening to the Parenting with Impact podcast with Elaine and Diane.
For more information on the Impact Parents community or to join Sanity School for Parents, please visit impactparents.com. If you like what you've heard, please share this podcast with friends who need similar guidance and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.